Hello, abnormal family. I hope y'all have had a good week. We've made it to Saturday. Don't forget, tonight at 9 o'clock is going to be our premiere. I, along with the moderators, will be in the chat with you guys. The premiere is a good one. It's some encounters from a subscriber, and I think y'all are going to really enjoy it. I want to thank each and every one of you for the support that you're providing for me and my family. It really means a lot to us. If you would like to help support our family, you can go to the oh wow, I'm losing it, guys. It's Friday, can you tell? I will put the links in the description. Let's get on with this video before I screw anything else up. The events described herein happened a long time ago. More than a decade, in fact, but I still remember most of the details quite clearly. For a little bit of context, I was born and raised in a small rural town in the southeastern U.S. But at the time of this story, a sizable portion of my family lived in the backwoods of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. Once a year, my parents and I would pile into the car and make a trip up to see my Michigan relatives, and we would all converge on a small campground on the shores of Lake Superior for a 3-hour day reunion. I always looked forward to it, because it always meant several days of enjoying good home-cooked food by the lake shore and family. I especially loved seeing all of my cousins who were similar ages to me, plus most of the older family members would either be preoccupied with catching up on gossip or busy making casseroles and other dishes for the cookout. This meant that all of the kids were free to roam the beautiful shoreline of the lake or go hiking in the woods or just generally be free from our parents. It was a real blast. At the time that this story happened, I would have been about 13 years old. Likewise, two of my cousins, Erica and Cody, were the same age as me, and another cousin named Dan was 2 years younger. Erica and Cody and I always hung out together at reunions since we were all the same age. The older cousins were too grown up to bother us, but we were too old to be stuck with the little kids. Dan was in between. Too old for the kindergartners, but too young for us. Big and mature middle schoolers. He was funny and nice, though, so we would usually let him hang with us. Anyway, the first day of the reunion, we all did the usual running around and swimming, but we decided that this year we should go do something more daring. Since we were practically grown-ups now, to that end, we asked our cousin Bradley if there was any way or any scary places that we could go to. Bradley was kind of a jerk sometimes, but he was the youngest of the older cousins, so he would most of the time be more approachable. Besides, he was in ROTC at his high school, and he carried a pocket knife all the time, so he was pretty much as good as a space marine as we could get. Bradley acted annoyed at first, but eventually he caved in and told us about a creepy abandoned farm that bordered the campground on the side. The fields were still used for growing wheat and corn, even though the house and equipment shed were run down and dilapidated. He eventually told us a spooky tale of how the farmer who lived there had gone insane and started kidnapping local children and eating them. Of course, the story was completely made up to scare us, but at the time, it sure seemed real enough to us. So with visions of insane, fanged-toothed cannibal farmers in our heads, we all decided this would be a great place to explore to show that we were fearless adults. We spent the rest of the evening biding our time, and once our parents were all asleep, we snuck out into the cabins and met at the picnic areas. Erica was the first, and I arrived just a few minutes before Cody, but Dan didn't show up for a while. Just when we assumed he had chickened out, though, he finally came trotting down the path from his cabin. After a little bit of teasing, we decided that we should go ahead and get moving if we wanted to get back on time to catch a little bit of sleep. We had all brought our flashlights, and Erica had brought her new camera since she was going through a photographer phase at the time. The campground wasn't really that big, so we were able to make it to the edge of the foot in about half an hour. We hopped the ramshackled split-rail fence bordered the campground, and we could see the farmhouse in the distance. There was just one problem. It was on the far side of a head-high cornfield. But not willing to be deterred from our little investigation into the property, we made our way into the moonlight field. The corn wasn't quite ready, but it was a little green and lush, not dry and creepy in the midst of the foliage. The air was refreshingly damp and cool as we walked. We whispered to one another about what we would do if we encountered the cannibal farmer, and we teased one another with pokes and prods, seeing who was on the edge of jumpiness. Finally, we reached the edge of the cornfield, and the terrain opened up into an overgrown grassy yard surrounded by a single-story farmhouse and a run-down equipment shed. Rusted and neglected farm equipment lay scattered around the yard, surrounded by high grass and weeds, hay balers, box scrapers, cedars, you name it. The place definitely had a creepy vibe. We were looking for maybe even a little bit too much. We stood in silence for a moment. Then Dan and Cody both suggested we should turn back and return to our cabins, since we had seen what we came for. Erica was braver, though. She had said she wanted to get some pictures of the old shed and the farmhouse. Besides, she said, with a big full moon like that in the sky, I might actually be able to get some of these pictures. If I'm honest, I was feeling a little creeped out myself. But I didn't want to look like a coward, and since we had come all this way, I figured we might as well have a look around, right? We headed to the equipment shed first, immediately spooking a barn owl with our lights, and all but dying of fright when it screeched at us. We poked around in the shed for a few minutes, the beams of our flashlights casting terrible shadows as they came across the rusted tines of the blades of the forgotten machinery. And then we began to move toward the dilapidated house. However, as we walked, we kept hearing rustling sounds, as though somebody was moving out in the cornfield. Every time we stopped to listen, the sound stopped too, almost like it was following us. Erica wouldn't be deterred, though, so we finally made it to the house. The porch was rotted and practically falling in, and attached to the door was a slip of bright orange paper. Encased a heavy plastic laminated, it read, "Notice of Eviction," and it was dated nearly a year ago. The door was sturdy, and it was locked, and we didn't want to actually break in, though, so one of the windows was open, and we circled around the building and crawled inside. By now, the pacing in the cornfield had stopped, so we could all relax a little, assuming it was just a raccoon or something similar. As we rounded the corner of the back of the house, we noticed the storm cellar doors were wide open, so we figured that would be our ticket inside. However, when we reached the gaping entrance of the cellar, we were greeted with a less than welcoming sight. The concrete floor of the cellar was covered in animal bones and shredded skins. Deer, cattle, raccoon, dogs, birds, all skeletal, mostly skeletal. Likewise, the thick wooden doors of the cellar were covered in scratches and claw marks like something sharp had been scraped against them regularly. The grass around the entrance to the cellar was worn down, and the dirt was packed with regular traffic. Anybody who has worked in taxidermy or forensics will tell you that the old bones have a very particular smell. It's not exactly the signature smell of death or the scent of decay. It's something entirely different, and that cellar absolutely reeked of it. The four of us stood in the entrance of the cellar, open-mouthed and shocked. We stood stone still, as though that would protect us from whatever it was that lived down there. Wordlessly, Dan and Cody backed away. Erica and I shone our flashlights down into the cellar, looking for any sign that there might be something alive down there. We saw nothing, but the piles of bones and the claw marks on the doors were more than enough to persuade Erica that she didn't really need to take pictures of the inside of the house. We all quickly made a decision to go back the way we came, and we were debating if we should call the police, but then something stopped us in the middle of our whispered argument. A soft thud emanated from the rusted hay baler, about halfway across the yard, and then came the sound of something sharp scratching against the metal. All of us looked at one another, exchanging wordless, "Did you hear that too? Look." We all shone our flashlights in the direction of the sound, and simultaneously we all saw it. There, atop the rusty green baler, was the shape of a large canine. It was far too big to be a coyote, and its fur was very dark. However, its outline wasn't quite right for a wolf either. Of course, it was hard to focus on anything except the piercing yellow-green eyes and the carcasses of the 2-point buck it held in its jaws. It didn't make any noise, no growling or snarling at all. But we understood the message it was communicating with this glare, and it was to leave. And we did. The 4 of us all ran headlong, screaming into the cornfield, making a desperate break for the safety of our cabins. Just as I was running into the field, however, I looked over my shoulder, making sure the beast wasn't following us. It wasn't, and it hadn't. But when I looked back, what I saw was almost as unsettling. The thing had stood up. It was standing on its hind legs, now holding the deer carcass in its arms as if it watched us leave. It only looked back for a second, and I had only looked at it for a second. But I knew what I had seen. After that, the whole memory makes me thank God that I survived this. We ran through the cornfield all the way back home. For some reason, this thing did not follow us. I don't know why, but this thing went on with this business, carrying the deer down into the cellar, probably where it was going to eat it. That night when we arrived back at the cabins, we were so afraid. We knew not to tell our parents what we had done because we'd be in deeper trouble for sneaking off in the middle of the night and especially trespassing. But what I saw that night has changed my life. To know that something was out there, and probably carrying the dead deer the whole time, just waiting for us to leave so it could go down into the cellar. Do you think it was just waiting to eat? I think it was waiting to see if y'all were going to go down there and invade its property. If y'all would have went down in that cellar, and there only been one way out of there, it would have shut the door, locked you in there, maybe saved you for later, ate y'all one by one, and it wouldn't have had to hunt for a while. There's a lot of things that could have went wrong with that. I think it's a really good thing that y'all did not go down in there. And, y'all were trespassing. And I always tell people, don't trespass. Always, go by the law when you're exploring and stuff. But when you do come up on old houses like that, old buildings, old barns and stuff like that, they are perfect places for these things to live. And to go somewhere you haven't been before, that you don't know nothing about, and to go at nighttime, I don't think that was a wise decision. I think maybe better planning next time would save you some of these encounters because, number one, get permission from the landowners always. And number two, scout it out during the day if you're not familiar with it. Don't go in there at night whenever you're not familiar with the place. All you're doing is giving it just that much more opportunity and advantage over you. Thank you for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed the premiere tonight. I cannot wait to visit with you all in the chat. And until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And we'll see you on the next one.